Welcome to the Esports Business Podcast, where we connect the time-tested principles of business and team management with the rapidly growing esports industry. I'm Ben Wiggins, here with Shivneet Sharma. Thanks for checking in with us. Today, we are bringing on Dazl and Jake to talk console gaming. Dazl is the host of a fast-growing Twitch show, Off the Wall, which focuses on the competitive esports scene in the console league. Jake is an owner of the Console Gaming League, or CGL, which just completed the biggest Xbox Overwatch tournament in history and boasts thriving communities within all the major esports games available on console. We'll be talking with both of them about how they're putting their passion into an area of gaming that sometimes goes a little bit overlooked in the gaming community, and they're eager to tell us just how talented console players can be. But before we get into that, let's go over some headlines. The GSA, or Global Speedrun Association, tweeted this week, GSA presents PACE 2019, that was their hashtag, the first competitive speedrun live event featuring the league grand finals for the world's 3 most contested speed games. There will be showcase runs and races, panels, gaming activities, and much more. The featured games will be Super Mario Odyssey, any percent league, meaning any percent that you accumulate before you finish the game is fine for the speedrun. Celeste, any percent league, and Super Mario 64, the 70-star league Division 1. So this was an interesting story to me. Shivneet, what was your take?
Now, you know how I feel about these niche esports coming into my league. Remember when we talked about Farm Simulator? Remember when we talked about all this stuff? I don't know. So the speedrun community is really weird, right? I'm not saying they're weird, but I'm saying the audience for it and all that stuff, because it's in some points you wanna, you know, the ending almost, right? Like, you know this guy's gonna complete the game, like, you know what he's doing. I think the rules are kind of dodgy a little bit. Like, can they use glitches? Can they use like all these other, like, what's allowed, what isn't, right? I think the problem I see with the speedrun community and doing something like this is it's hard to have an audience that isn't really into speedrunning, right? I can't just take like my brother or my dad and be like, hey, let's watch this guy play a game and do it really fast. But I can take them into like CSGO and they understand, like, okay, the goal is to plant a bomb and kill these people, and they have guns. That's really easy to get into a spectator role. Ben, what about you?
So, first of all, I'm looking forward to the Twitter replies when everyone hears about Shivneet hating on niche esports per usual. So, I had to have a little bit of an argument with my past self when I read this. My first reaction 10 years ago would have been, there is no way this would ever work. I would have said not just no, but hell no. But honestly, I think I would have been wrong. And Shivneet, with apologies to your perspective on this, I think what makes something like this work is that it's very scalable in both directions, and they're starting small. The Twitter account has about 3,600 followers. They're hosting this event at Xanadu Games in Maryland. They don't have to make a $10 million investment. I don't know.
I'm not arguing the scalability or anything like that, right? They're definitely doing that on the business side. Well, I'm arguing, or I'm trying to figure out, like, where do you get 10-year-old Jimmy? Like, why does he care about Super Mario 64? Why does he care about Celeste? Why does he care about Super Mario Odyssey? Why do these people that don't know anything about these games, that have never played it, that have never experienced the awe of Super Mario 64 and throwing Bowser around in a circle? I don't understand how the audience is going to grow, but I guess if the niche community can keep it alive, it has its merits.
Yeah, they're getting reps with existing IPs at a relatively low commitment level. Maybe it will succeed to the point that it requires a bigger venue in 5 years. Does it ever become like an esport at the level that something like Overwatch does? Maybe not. Badminton is definitely a sport. It's just a more niche sport. And I know how you feel about niche esports, but I think this is net a good thing.
We'll see. So, on to our next story. According to esports.net, popular and long-running TV series The Simpsons saw something pretty interesting this last Sunday. Bart Simpson, bratty son of Homer Simpson, got into esports. Specifically, he got so good he managed to be in the competitions along with some other recurring characters. Homer is taking the role of Bart's passionate coach. Bart gets a new computer and finds himself hooked to the game Conflict of Enemies, a title based on the ever-popular MOBA League of Legends. He eventually makes it all the way to a world championship of the game and travels all the way to Seoul. Naturally, Homer is mostly interested because he found out that the highest paid players can make millions. That's a pretty fun setup to begin with, but it gets even better when you add it to the fact that two particular people collaborate on the episode. Waylon Roselle and Jared Kennedy, the co-heads of Esports at Riot Games. Riot is, of course, the company behind League of Legends. A Riot representative had this to say: "We hope that this episode, on top of all the work we're doing around the world establishing leagues that are working with leading brands like Nike, Mercedes-Benz, as well as the rising popularity of streamers and pro players, will make a real impact on how people view League of Legends and esports in the long run." Ben, what is Simpsons doing? What is Fox doing, man? Why are they encroaching on my territory?
I'm so happy about this. Maybe I should be offended, but once you're getting lampooned by The Simpsons and South Park, you've really arrived. Esports is really hitting the zeitgeist, and pop culture events like this are just further evidence of that. My one worry coming out of something like this is that some dumb Congress person or activist group will take one aspect of a comedy episode, blow it completely out of proportion, and use it as an excuse to legislate against esports. Something like that happens every now and then, and we have to be watchful for that sort of thing. But otherwise, 2 big thumbs up from this guy. What do you think?
So, whenever I think of video games and TV shows, I harken back to my first time watching Love of Warcraft, I believe, with the episode on South Park, where they're all playing, they're grinding, and they're trying to beat the really morbidly obese gamer. And I think South Park did it right. I think poking fun at esports and going that hard, or like not esports, but gaming in general, I think that's how you're supposed to do it. I think Simpsons, I think this is a grab at a young audience, right? Simpsons is older than me. I'm 23. I'm pretty sure it's a little bit older than that, or as old as me. And
yes,
yeah,
you're right.
Yeah, and I think, we don't see it, but I honestly think Simpsons is trying to grab an audience because they're maybe losing a lot of what they originally got. I mean, they are the premier satire animated show, right? And streaming services are kind of killing that off. And I think Simpsons is, it just feels desperate, almost desperate.
Oh, that's an interesting take. I'm going to defend The Simpsons and just say that I think they're kind of allowed to, to talk about whatever they want. I think The Simpsons has always been something that, goes for stuff that's topical. And when Pokemon Go was a thing a few years ago, I'm sure they did an episode that touched on that. When Barack Obama was elected president, I'm sure he showed up in The Simpsons or South Park at some point. Shows like this grab whatever's happening in the culture zeitgeist, and for The Simpsons to do something like this, is there a desperation to it? Maybe, but on the other hand, I think they just talk about what's happening in culture. It's an interesting perspective, but I'm not sure I feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm just sort of against the sort of BuzzFeed style. I think I'm just numb to the whole let's take the most important or relevant thing and just blow it out of proportion and kill it, right? South Park doesn't do that. South Park, in my opinion, right, takes jokes and they go 1,000. They just go 1,000, yeah. Right? And they go where Simpsons wouldn't go. And I think that's the issue I have.
So where do you think South Park would go with something like this? That's a fascinating perspective. I hadn't considered that. Where do you think South Park would go?
Oh, South Park would go into, they would talk about, they would go into the dirty stuff, right? The stuff that player rights and these guys actually are getting, there's so many players getting messed up. These guys, Matt and Trey, they do their research, right? They do their research. A lot of the World of Warcraft stuff was real stuff. They were obese, people getting obese, people dedicating their lives to it, losing their jobs and all that stuff, and the importance it has in community. I think, I'm not a writer or anything like that, but I think South Park would really shine a light on the esports world that we don't know about, that people don't want to talk about, and I think that's really important, right?
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way, but I think you might be onto something there. That the idea that The Simpsons is not taking the really kind of brave approach to this, whereas you feel like South Park would. I hadn't considered that. VegasOnlineCasino.com cited a research study this week that says gambling on esports is expected to hit $13 billion in 2020, and more than 600 million spectators are expected to tune in. The website says, at this point, exact gambling figures are hard to obtain, but one way to see the rise in popularity is through the leading esports betting platform, Pinnacle. It took 5 years, from 2010 to 2015, for the company to register its 1 millionth bet. It took 3 years, from 2015 to 2018, for them to hit 10 million. Shivneet, your thoughts?
I think the numbers on this article is kind of weird, right? 13 billion in 2020. I don't even think esports is at $1 billion in revenue and profit yet. I do think that, the gambling market for esports is there. Sports gambling, has a really big market. NFL, NBA, all this stuff. It's a really huge market. Is it close to 13 billion? I doubt it. It might be more closer to maybe like $1 billion, $2 billion. And I think the numbers are kind of weird and wonky. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, traditional sports gambling definitely might be in the tens of billions. I'm not citing a source on that, but I think this article is just bad reporting. Total esports revenue is expected to grow 35% to about 1.5 billion next year, 2020. And that's a number from the article as well. So I agree with you. How could esports gambling represent 10 times that figure? I think some of the numbers in this article are reasonable and others are probably just fabricated. As esports consumers, we have to hold media outlets responsible for citing sources and not stating pie in the sky hopes as actual facts. I'm as excited as anyone else about the legalization of sports gambling and esports gambling, but this site seems like it's out to stir the pot with some pretty outright fake news.
Stir the pot is putting it lightly. I think what happens is, I think inadvertently this online casino company is, for a lack of a better word, crapping on esports, right? It's putting esports in a light that it shouldn't be in. Whenever gambling and esports gets talked about together, you immediately think to the T. Martin scandal with the casino and the CS:GO, stuff like that. And I think this puts esports in a vulnerable state as to where if any other sport was talked about, football, basketball, MLB, it would just be like, oh wow, good job. But for esports, it's like, oh my god, like they're betting. These are kids, right? These are 16 to 18-year-olds, and I think they need to do a better job being more objective.
Our guests today are the hosts of the Off the Wall podcast and one of the owners of the Console Gaming League, Dazl167 and Jake. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. It's a pleasure to have you both here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about yourselves. First of all, how do you two know each other? How did you meet?
I'm going to say from my perspective real quick. So I have been participating in the Console Gaming League for, I guess, maybe a season and a half ago, where I was as a player. And I personally liked the participation of the league and stuff like that. And, the league itself went through some rebranding and changes. And eventually I got to meet Jake through that. And then, developing a show and stuff like that. So as I was trying to emerge myself as like, for another podcast and stuff like that, I started, talking to him just because he was, one of the owners of the league. And then, that's how I met Jake.
Jake, anything to add to that?
Dazl he's played in the league. His team won the championship last year. So I kind of knew, at least for his tier. So I knew him through that, and then actually kind of worked with him on some branding for his team, and then promoting, as well as just kind of getting this show going that would work kind of hand in hand with the league.
Great. So tell us about the show. Tell us about Off the Wall. What is the show? Who's its primary audience? Tell us a little bit more about that, Dazl.
Well, Off the Wall is a what I like to describe it as is a community podcast. It's basically a podcast dedicated to the console Overwatch scene, where people from PS4 and Xbox One. I highlight players and org leaders, admins and CGL owners and streamers who dedicate themselves to, the console Overwatch scene. So I try to interview people who are prominent members of that community, top 500 players, people who are really really high up there. And when I started off the show, it was something that I did because I felt like there was a void. There was a lot of talent, especially that I was seeing at the time. For example, like people like Gator and Tensa. Those are players that came from Xbox who eventually moved on to, Gator now in the OWL and Tensa in the academy teams. And those are really good players who eventually moved on to something big. And I knew there was players like that in the Xbox scene who weren't getting recognized at some point. So I thought it would be good to do like an in-depth interview of just me sitting down with them, talking about their gaming experience, how they get to where they were, tips and tricks and stuff like that. So, each episode is just an in-depth interview for a specific person. And, we talk about their opinions on the meta, on the game. We talk about controversial issues that they might have had throughout the time, and just the scene in general. And, it filled a void that people got really excited about, when I first did it, and I got, a little bit of traction for it. I started seeing 20, 30, 40 people watch at a time, and then it grew from there. And, eventually it is what it is now, which is like just a part of the community, where now everybody wants to get interviewed. And that was the whole point I was trying to do, is I was trying to get everybody to be excited about it and eventually interview as many people as I can. And so that's why, I call it a community podcast, because it's pretty much kind of like, I try to see it like an all access channel where it's like, everybody has the right to be here. Just let me know your story so I can, develop some questions. And, people, players really have fun with it. And everybody who's been on the show really likes it and, always recommends it to their friends. Like, you should get on the show. It's awesome.
So tell us a little bit about your CGL team. It sounded like you guys had a lot of success last year. What was that journey like?
Well, it was really interesting because I think as a team, we started off as diamond players, to be honest. We were diamonds, and we just kind of wanted to play for fun. And then, we brought in some people who were higher ups. We brought people who were high masters and grandmasters and even top 500s. And at the time, they were people who really knew how to play the game and wanted to play it competitively. So, I was like, well, listen, I'm down to manage a team, but I'm not like great. And they were like, well, I think we can grow as a team. And throughout the league, I personally and a lot of my friends who were on the team were able to just basically rank up, and we got better through playing in the league. So, we started out, we had a rocky start, and then all of a sudden, throughout the season, we just started doing really well. I think we just started being able to play really well. We ended up as the second seed overall. And, during the, playoffs, we just kind of were basically able to knock all the teams out. And then even during the finals, we came in as the underdog, and just we took it to the brink of 5 maps, I believe. And even just 99 to 99 all the way to the end. And we eventually won. And each one of our players since then has all hit Grandmaster. And some of us have all reached top 500, including myself. It was the first time last season or last competitive season in Overwatch where I hit top 500. I peaked out at 4150. And considering I came, from Diamond, where I was stuck in Diamond for a long time, and just, I had a lot of players who taught me throughout the way, and and stuff like that in the CGL, playing in the league and scrimming and getting to know the game better really helped me, personally get better. So.
Were there any challenges that you feel like you dealt with specifically as a lower tier player managing higher tier players at first?
Oh, absolutely. There was absolutely some of that, because I think that, there was a obvious skill gap that, high tier players get frustrated with, where, they would see me and they'll be like, oh, if I was playing with a higher tier player, he would have already known what to do, as opposed to you. It's kind of frustrating where I got to tell you what to do in certain areas. And for me, like, I've always been good at managing teams, but obviously at that time I wasn't the player that I was now, so I wasn't able to be as good. And so, my difficulty was being able to objectively manage a team while at the same time playing for it. I sometimes I'd sub myself out because I'd be like, I'm just not good for this moment. And it took me, it took me a while to realize personally that for me, I just had to look at myself objectively and just be like, I'm not good right now. Like, I can get better and I have to, and eventually I'll learn. But for right now, I have to just remember that, this is not it for me. I have a lot of learning to do. And I did that for myself, where I allowed other players to take my spots and I learned from them, and I got coached by higher tier players. And, I just basically continued to learn. And, it was something where it was kind of difficult for me as a player because I was used to playing competitively in other games and just being able to just be good from the get-go. And with this, it was like, no, I'm not good. I have to learn to be good, and then I'll, do that. So that was probably the biggest hardship that I had, was just trying to just get to the level where my other players were.
Yeah, the benefits of playing on a competitive team, which kind of takes us into the league. So, Jake, talk with us a little bit about the CGL. What was its inception?
So CGL actually is a rebrand. We started back in, I think, February of 2017 as an Overwatch Xbox League. And it ran as an Overwatch Xbox League essentially up until September of 2018. At which point, so prior to that, in August, the fifth season of the Overwatch Xbox League, or at that time it was Overwatch Xbox Community, had started. I joined as a player, and I was looking to invest into something to do with esports. So about a month in, I realized this is a good format that we could actually replicate out to PlayStation as well, and be a little bit more inclusive, or a lot more inclusive. And then wanted to do multiple titles, so not just Overwatch. So talked to the owners at the time about expanding both outside of Overwatch as well as to other titles. And they liked the idea, so we rebranded the CGL and planned out this giant season with Overwatch. And since then, we've been working on expanding to other titles like Call of Duty, Smash. I think we're going to try Mortal Kombat and maybe some other things here pretty soon. Apex as well.
How does the model replicate across titles? Like, are certain games really easy to bring in, other games more difficult to bring in? Does it depend on the publisher? Does it depend on how welcoming the community is? What are some of the challenges that you run into adding titles to your repertoire?
Good question. So the biggest thing is developers. So the spectator client, in addition to Twitch, I think are the two biggest innovations to esports right now for tournament organizers. So having a user-friendly access to a spectator mode that's genuinely good and easy for you to actually broadcast something, having a platform to broadcast it to, which is Twitch, combine those two. The problem we see right now with games is, especially with battle royale games, is the spectator client. And logistically, I can see why it's an issue for developers because of the hardware required to be able to run that. But it makes it hard to actually support it if we can't stream it or broadcast it.
Can you talk at all about, which developers have perhaps been the most helpful to you in terms of getting things set up in a way that allows you to do your business?
Blizzard. So Blizzard is a front runner, and a huge benefit to everybody in trying things out right now. So they have public access to obtaining a license to run and broadcast their game without the potential of being shut down. And they're the only ones I know that actually have like public access, apply for it right online. It's super easy to get to. The other thing is their spectator client and everything in Overwatch is literally designed so you can do this. So they're going on full on support and helping third-party providers. So I'm really hopeful that other developers will just follow suit.
That makes sense. So in multi-platform games such as Overwatch, the console version of the game and console players, despite the success that many console players have when they go over to PC, oftentimes console players are looked down upon by the self-titled PC master race. And it's kind of a meme, but the meme exists because a lot of PC players really do carry an air of superiority. Do you see a need to address this issue between platforms?
So I enjoyed this meme. The meme for me is it stems from the specs that you can do on a PC, that you can upgrade it on a constant basis, and then that you can have more options with a keyboard and higher sensitivity with a mouse. The thing is, that's not applicable in every situation. So it's technically a fallacy. It can provide advantages in some ways, whereas, on console there can be advantages in other ways. So I consider them two different platforms. I think there's over 600 million people that game on PC and over 600 million people that game on PS4 or Xbox. So they can work together, but they can work exclusively as well.
Yeah, I think that I've had this discussion because a lot of my friends who also played Xbox, they're in the same boat. I mean, I know Xbox players who, peaked at 4,500, 4,600 and now play 45, 4,600 on PC as well. And so, the biggest thing is that the game itself isn't just about mechanics, right? The mechanical ability of a person is only a certain percentage of what you need to win, specifically in an Overwatch game, right? So for a lot of players, game sense, positioning, teamwork, all of those things are bigger and a lot harder to master. And for somebody who is 45, 4,600, who has those abilities down, when they go to PC, being on a controller, or being on a mouse, it doesn't matter anymore. So that whole idea of like, we shouldn't take consoles seriously because, they're on controllers. And obviously you have better aim with a mouse and keyboard, which is true. I mean, you do have better aim with a mouse and keyboard, but that's only determining the aim. I know people like Joystick OW. He is a streamer for PC, and he plays with an Xbox controller. But he is a Rhine player. He's a Reinhardt player. He's a main tank. He doesn't need aim. But his main accomplishment is that he can play the game with high game sense, high positioning, and he knows how to play the game, and so aim doesn't factor into what he needs to do. And so and he's up there. He's up there in I don't know where he peaked, but I know he's up there at least 4,400 on PC, which is very it's very high. So, I think that people have that notion that, because PC Master Race, because you have that high sensitivity and the mouse and everything, but I think there is a really good skill at being good at controller. Obviously, it is more of a handicap than a mouse, but if you can get good at a controller and do the same things as somebody who is on a mouse, then that is a skill within itself. I mean, I think that just goes to show, and that translates to other games as well. I mean, you think of games like Apex and stuff like that, where people have the ability to play the game with mouse and keyboard on computer or on console as well. There's console players, they could probably put to shame a lot of PC players. And it's just mainly because they might be smarter players, because I don't think that automatically when you start playing a PC you just become a smarter player. You have to develop those skills, those game senses, and console players, there are a lot of them who are that good. And I think that's what like the CGL is great for, is that it kind of dispels that notion that people are, gamers are only good on PC.
You mentioned Apex, but what console-specific games or console-heavy games do you see elevating the exposure of console esports right now? Like, what are the strongest titles out there? And are there any games in development or just breaking in that could elevate console esports in the future?
I think that's an interesting question, but I don't know if there's anything specific to consoles right now that'll be able to do that. I mean, I know Jake probably has some insight onto maybe something that they're looking at as a league, but I think that for FPSs, I think the wave that's going in right now is kind of like they're looking at the Fortnite type of how do you say it, the what Fortnite built was being able to have PC players and console players all play on the same platform, where it's that cross platform was able for them to be able to play together. And I think a lot of people are looking at that right now. Now they're looking at, like, okay, a lot of developers are looking at being able to do that. So I don't know if there's anything specific for console that will be able to make that. I'm sure there will be. But as far as I know, I don't know that to be the case. I don't know if Jake has any idea on how that would be, but
yeah. So there's exclusives on console that come out exclusively on console, or they're delayed on PC. And then there's
like Mortal Kombat. You mentioned that earlier.
Well, Halo, Gears of War. Those type of titles. PlayStation is working on that as well. They've been working towards that. So they'll have titles that are exclusive that don't hit the market for PC and will never be competitive for PC gamers, period. Additionally, there's games that are better supported on console, like Rainbow Six, Siege, and Call of Duty are actually supported really well on console from developer end. So
why is that? Just out of curiosity.
They're two titles that never got huge on PC, I think. I mean, I think Counter-Strike and those type of titles have dominated that market. So my thing is, just because it's been dominated elsewhere doesn't mean it can't be a format that's supported and, have a base, a foundation, and a fan base, and a viewership base. And put on content that people want to enjoy. The thing with the boom in esports right now is it's very new. I mean, we're just a few years into the boom, and I think as we transition over the next decade or so, we're going to see a lot more support and a lot more esports in entertainment in general, and that'll give new opportunities. I think it's going to be our primary, if you look at how we consume entertainment 10 years ago versus 10 years from now, it's entirely different. And I think esports will have a huge part in that. And that'll put those new opportunities forth for these titles who have never had support, or these games, or these genres. to be able to have careers in those formats. And then there's also games like racing games, for example. A lot of people prefer to play those with controllers as opposed to mouse and keyboard. So there's always going to be those opportunities. They're just not as evident to the public section, just because nobody's ever really supported it.
Right. It seems to me, and maybe this is just my bias originally coming from the console world as well, but it seems like something like, I don't know, I'm just pulling a racing game out of the air, but something like Mario Kart seems like it makes more sense using an acceleration-based input rather than the position-based input of the mouse. It just seems to make more sense on a controller or some sort of, like even like the Wii sticks. It just seems more sensible to play a racing game that way. Am I alone in that?
I agree.
Now, I agree personally, and now it's to each their own, right? I mean, the reality is there's just two different formats you can do it. You can use mouse and keyboard, you use a controller. I think there's hybrid setups now, so I think it's a matter of preference. I think it is so segmented as far as what's popular in esports right now that a lot of people are blind to the future and how much support will come into esports. And titles they don't see right now being supported will be huge in the future. Like, I bet Mario Kart, for example, would have a huge following if they put it competitively.
Huh. Yeah, I bet you're right. I wonder why they haven't thought to try that yet. Nintendo doesn't, I mean, now that I think about it, Nintendo doesn't really seem to be big into the idea of esports. Am I wrong about that?
I think Smash Brothers is probably the only thing that they really, and I think there's other.
Yeah, you're right.
There might be other stuff, but you're right. I think Mario Kart, I think it's just the culture, right? Because I think Nintendo has developed a culture of like this is for kind of like kids, and I'm not saying obviously other people, and they're probably changing that with the Switch, right? Where they're appealing more to like an adult based audience, but I think their culture is more like we have fun and we want to do this for fun and stuff like that. So when they do have moments where there's games like Smash Brothers where it is competitive, it's kind of like the one exception to the rule. Mario Kart could do that as well. I think if somebody built a competitive scene for Mario Kart, that would be huge. I mean, I think there is probably a market for that. I just think that nobody thought about it because Nintendo's just been like a more like everybody wins, so but obviously that's not true. Smash Brothers has proven that that's not the case. So we'll just have to wait if somebody makes that move.
What's really fascinating to me is the idea that the competitive Smash Brothers scene hasn't really changed the way that the game is played by most people at all. In Overwatch, for example, it's really kind of impossible to get away from the even in quick play, like people will sometimes play meta comps. So Jake, what's this thing about a Mario Kart tourney?
Actually, I'm going to try it out. I want to try to do it and see what's the Mario Kart tourney.
Sure. I think it'd be really successful.
Honestly, like, who's to say it's not just because it's never been done before?
Right.
I think it'd be huge, honestly, if you think about it. I want to watch it. I want to see some pro Mario Kart players, like, who knows, they could be very entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely.
Think about Disney getting into that. Like, it could be nuts.
So tell us about the growth of multi-tier orgs in CGL. Do you encourage multi-tier orgs?
So multi-tier orgs, basically, that stems from Overwatch has a ranked system. In their competitive rank system, it ranks you in tiers. So Overwatch's tier system it ranks from gold up to grandmaster. It goes lower. So there's bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, masters, grandmaster, and then there's top 500 as well. But top 500 and Grandmaster are interchangeable if you hit top 500. So with that, there's a lot of people who play at each and every tier. Meaning, if you offer a system that supports every tier, then you can cater to a lot more people. Multi-tier orgs basically kind of started because we supported every tier. As we look to add, prize pools, orgs are looking to brand themselves more, try to get sponsors, and win the money. If there's a prize pool for every tier, then if you make a team for every tier, you have 5 times the opportunity. So I encourage it. I love it because it's building, and I guess that's what I'm looking for. It's embracing the concept of growing the idea of esports.
Do you ever worry about saturation? A lot of companies are looking to sort of bridge the gap between the amateur level and the pro level in esports, including GYO, which came on our show for the platform they developed specifically for that purpose. Tell us a little bit about how you see the market growing and possibly fragmenting.
It's a good question. So the reason why I went console, actually, as far as investing, is because the console specifically is not a saturated market. It's actually extremely unsaturated. There's almost no support, right? So, but there's almost no support, but there's a giant demographic. So I see it as a giant hole in the market. As far as saturation in gaming and esports, I think as it evolves, you'll see it grow into segmenting into different formats, and only certain things will or certain formats will make it, and certain formats won't. We'll figure it out. I don't know. It's interesting. That's the fun of being in this industry, is we've never seen anything like it before.
So, guys, how can the listeners follow what you're doing or participate in what you're doing? Dazl, you first. What would you like the listeners to go look up or check out?
Yes, Kinetics community server. I mean, as far as finding it, you could. I guess the best way to do it would be to go to my Twitch, because I have a link for it in my channel where people can just click on it and go on this. So it would be twitch.tv/Dazl167.
DAZL 167.
Yeah, exactly. DAZL 167. There's a link to the community server where you can just, click it and you'll be able to join. You can pick your role as far as what games you like to play, what rank you are in Overwatch. And yeah, you'll be able to, I mean, that's honestly for me, myself, like, it's just the best way for me to find out other players. Cause sometimes I'll get online and I'll be like, hey, who wants to play Apex? And then I'll get on people and people will be like, hey, I'm down to play Apex. And then, it's a great community server that has a lot of people and who are willing to always help and do a lot of stuff.
Great. Jake?
Yeah, so if you're a console gamer, there's a number of ways you can find us. Our Discord has, I think right now, about 6,500 people, and it's growing every day. So come there if you want to get up to date on any tournaments we're doing. We're constantly looking to expand and try new things with different titles. So I think just based on our conversation we just had, I'm going to do a Mario Kart tournament, see how that works out. So if you want to play in a Mario Kart tournament, go join the server. It's discord.me/console gaming league. You can find it on our Twitter as well, which is @console gaming LG. Our Twitch is twitch.tv/CGL1. And then we have Facebook as well as Instagram as well. But the best bet is definitely join the server, the Discord server, as most activity happens there. And then everything else can be found in that Discord that you can branch out and find. And then definitely watch Dazl's podcast.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited. It sounds super fun. And look at that. It just came about on this show.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We appreciate you, and we will let you get back to your days.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thanks everyone for listening. Make sure to check back every week for more episodes. Our newest segment with the company, In Case You Missed It, can be found on Instagram at Esports Business News. If you have a moment to subscribe to the pod on iTunes and leave us a 5-star review or offer us some feedback, we greatly appreciate it. We love positivity, but also we want to make this show the best it can be. If you want to do more to support us, consider joining our Patreon under Top Score Solutions and get access to exclusive content and perks. We've also put links to our Discord, Twitter, Facebook, and website in a shortened link on the show notes. We appreciate you listening. Stay gold, everyone.